Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in to the beginning of Week 5 edition of Establish the Show here, Showdown style. We have a single game slate tonight, and it does not feature the New York Football Giants. That's the plus. The negative is it is the Washington Commanders and Chicago Bears. I would say definitely one of the bottom 3 teams in the league, 2 of the bottom 10 or 12 teams in the league. And that said, we have a 6-point. I think the Commanders are 6-point favorites of the 44-ish point over under. Maybe some fantasy goodness here. I'm Gary Hartman, here to break it all down with you with, of course, the one, the only, Cody Main. Cody, how are you feeling about this Thursday night contest?
There is a single game slate tonight, I think, is the best way to sum up how I feel about this slate. Commanders, Bears, there are 2 football teams that will be playing football tonight. We'll see how well those 2 football teams do the footballing. I'm excited for it. I think there's some interesting angles. I think the field will funnel themselves into a particular type of construction tonight. Maybe that's right. Maybe that's wrong. I think we'll be able to talk through some interesting angles on this slate, though.
Yeah. I just read through your article. I think it's a good comprehensive breakdown per usual. So if you are a subscriber to Establish the Run, be sure to check out what you see on your screen here, which is all the goodness that Cody Main brings you as far as usage, interesting angles, et cetera. Let's just dive right in here. Well, I guess first, you take a look at construction stuff, anything from a macro view that stands out to you on this slate, Cody?
Yeah, look, this will become clear as we go through the players and the pricing and just how the slate is constructed by DraftKings. You're going to see a lot of 5-1. And by 5-1, I mean 5 Washington players, 1 Bear on the bring back. I saw a message in chat already that said our optimal to establish the run is a 5 Commanders, 1 Bears bring back, the 1 Bear being Justin Fields, a captain. I actually think something like that will be very common tonight in terms of how it profiles from a projection standpoint and how people think the game is going to play out. So you're going to see a ton of Commanders, Bears in that onslaught side on the Commanders at 17.6%, even more 4-2. That feels a little bit more comfortable just because of the way the pricing works. You could throw in maybe a cheap Bears skill position player, Khalil Herbert, we'll get to in a second, maybe some value there. But you're going to see very little on the Bears heavy side. So if you think Chicago can keep this game close or cover the 6-point spread or just happens to play well from an offensive standpoint as they did last week in a loss, you could get paid off with really low ownership on that Bears side. So Justin Fields plus 2 pass catchers, Justin Fields, Khalil Herbert, and the Bears defense, things of that nature are going to be a little bit less commonly utilized than maybe you think in this game environment.
Yeah, obviously was happy to see the Bears offense show a level of competence last week, put up 28 points, did end up losing that game after the big first half. But as you astutely say in your article, Justin Fields did not, was pretty much the optimal quarterback. If you go through the main slate, it ended up being Josh Dobbs for a salary reason, but it was pretty much Justin Fields with his 30 plus points at only 6,500 on the main slate. And it was all through the air, 330 plus passing yards, 4 touchdowns. And we know usually he brings a really nice floor with his legs. So people that were drafting him in the 4th round of season long or best ball drafts had to be happy to see that. The season is still very young. We know that his ceiling is there. And that is all to say, do I trust this Bears team? No. But do I think Justin Fields has the highest ceiling on this slate? I do by a lot. So how do you feel about Fields tonight?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think DraftKings came close to getting the pricing right. I mean, look, still, this is a really, really low team total. I think it's at 18.5, 19 points for the Bears team total. But Justin Fields does so much with his legs. He's so much of this offense. Even when he wasn't getting it done with his legs last week, he was getting it done through the air. Look, I know the design rush rate and stuff like that is down. I know the passing efficiency has not been good. I know we have very little, if any, faith left in this Bears offensive coaching staff. I still think, all those things said, this is kind of like a Daniel Jones spot from last week. Look, I think that the Bears offense is pretty likely to fail in this spot. Maybe less, maybe even more likely to fail than I thought the Giants offense was going to fail against the Seahawks. But somebody's got to get there from the Bears side. You can't roster six Commanders. And at some point, you're looking for raw points. And Daniel Jones, actually, for as bad as that game was for him with the pick 6 and all the sacks that he took, almost got there in terms of being in the optimal lineup. So those are things that I like to consider when thinking about players like this who are expensive, like Justin Fields is. I think he just offers so much on his legs. And even if he isn't getting it done there, I think he's going to be doing something through the air if it happens to be a negative game script. So I think In terms of cash game locks, if there are any on this slate, you probably start with Justin Fields. I think that, because we've seen it once now and it just happened last week and the Commanders still aren't a great defense and they're liable to give up plays through the air, I still think that the captain ownership is going to be elevated as bad as the play had been through the first 3 weeks of the season. So I don't think we're going to get any sort of discount on Justin Fields' captain ownership. And part of that is because of the way the skill position players are priced on this slate. But I think 21.4% is okay. I really don't even think it's bad there. We'll talk about ways we can maybe play Fields at captain and try to get unique through some of our roster construction ideas. But I still think it's a pretty good play.
Yeah, I mean, bear case is Washington has a strong pass rush. Justin Fields still holds the ball for far too long. Don't really believe in this Bears offensive line, and it kind of just crumbles around him. My argument would be that even in those scenarios where he's getting beat up, there's a floor there. Just because, hey, that means he's scrambling a little bit more. That probably means they're playing from behind, game scripts in his favor. So I do think that there's a floor there. So I agree with you from the cash perspective. I think what from a tournament perspective, you have to decide, is that ceiling worth that 20% captain ownership? I see some people in the chat that think maybe not. You really can make the argument either way there on Fields. And obviously we always talk about, hey, what's the right spot that you need to get right on the slate? Weirdly, I think it's how you utilize Justin Fields tonight, because, he could easily break the slate for you if you do not get that right.
And look, like when you have this rushing floor from these quarterbacks, it takes so much for them to truly fail in these single game slates where you're limited to so many options, only so many options. And again, we just saw it with Daniel Jones. That game probably went about as bad as it possibly could for Daniel Jones and the Giants offense. He still was close. He still almost got there. So I think it just highlights the importance of the quarterback position on single game slates, even when it goes disastrously bad, particularly these guys that have some rushing upside. And Fields still has a 27.5% rush share in this offense, could push 30% or more if he gets a few more design rushing attempts. I think it's still a good play at 11K and 70 to 75% ownership.
Yeah, I agree there. On the other side, Sam Howell only 9,400. The Commanders are sitting here as 6-point favorites. Also a bit of a dual threat as well. Not too scary of a matchup at all from a defensive perspective. So seems like to me, he's a little underpriced here, and also a possible cash game lock at that price and projection.
Yeah, if you're worried about Fields, I think Sam Howell is the clear cash game lock. It's just one of those spots, like, don't overthink it. It's Sam Howell. He's been taking a ton of sacks, but this is a really good offensive environment for him against a really bad Chicago Bears secondary. 6-point home favorites, 25-point team total. He isn't adding a ton with his legs, but he's adding some just to kind of buoy that floor a little bit. He's got 11, 82, 1 through 4 games. I mean, substantial. It's amount of rushing from him. And he's got good weapons around him. Eric Bieniemy's dialing up a ton of dropbacks. So even if they're in positive script, which I expect them to be as 6-point home favorites, you're going to get plenty of dropbacks from him. I think we actually took an over on his passing attempts as well at 9,400. And again, partially because of the way this slate is priced, I think Sam Howell's pretty safe in cash. I think you're on mute, Gary.
My bad. Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think tournament ownership looks pretty efficient as well. Let's keep this train rolling and go over to running back. I think a really interesting position tonight. Brian Robinson has definitely been the lead dog for Washington. It has not really been a committee, as maybe there was some of the reports were coming out midsummer that Bieniemy wants to be using a lot of Antonio Gibson. We have not seen that. Robinson's getting all the valuable stuff around the goal line as well, and he's been pretty good. As a result, he's all the way up to 9,200. Pretty pricey, I would say, for him. But highest ceiling of and base projection of any running back on the slate. 14% captain ownership, also kind of hefty. So how are you handling Brian Robinson tonight before we talk about these other backs?
Yeah, just hanging out in Discord a little bit before the show and now seeing some of the comments on the show here. I think Brian Robinson's going to end up getting pushed up in terms of both total ownership and captain ownership. A, you've got the money to do it, I think, on this slate. B, the options priced above him aren't all that attractive. The wide receivers, particularly, you have a good projection. Game script kind of naturally fits that. Running backs have chewed up the Bears defense to start the season. It all just kind of aligns for Brian Robinson to be one of the most popular plays on the slate. I still think he'll fall short of Fields and Sam Howell, but I think he'll be pretty darn close in that respect. He is still the lead back in this offense, and it's a great spot. 66% rush share, 57% red zone rushing share. He's handled all of the attempts inside the 5-yard line. So if there was a guy on this slate that could give you that, that kind of classic 100 yards plus a touchdown, get the bonus on DraftKings, maybe rack up a few receptions, Brian Robinson is certainly that guy. So I don't fault anyone for wanting to go there. Just know you're going to run into some ownership. I think it's a great play. Running backs have really elevated, or the Bears defense has really elevated opposing running backs this season. Not really because they've been so bad on like a per carry basis. They're just giving up so many plays to the opposing offenses because their offense can't keep drives going. So you're going to see plenty of rushing attempts for Brian Robinson. If he did end up with something like 20 for 101, wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, I think there's a really high floor here. And I do think that if you're going 4-2 or 5-1 on the Washington side, I have a very hard time seeing a scenario in which Brian Robinson is not one of those 4 or 5 players. I just think that in those scenarios where they're covering the spread, if it's a Washington onslaught, his workload in general in those situations is, almost Derrick Henry-esque, I think, when they just run out the clock with him, so many carries, and kind of just works his way into that type of lineup. So, yeah, I don't mind the Robinson play at all. I like him more in those, heavy Washington builds. Let's talk about the other side of his, his counterpart there, and Antonio Gibson. I know you wrote in the article that you don't mind playing them together. He's still more of a 2-minute guy, long down the distance guy at this point. Can catch some balls, but man, we have not seen any semblance of a floor ceiling combo really at all from him. Obviously this is a 1-game slate. 3,200, I think, is fine for ultimately what we know the talent of Antonio Gibson to be if he were to have the opportunity. There's some fumbling concerns there. I don't think the coaching staff fully trusts him, but, it's leverage off Robinson. There's always the risk of running back injury. We're talking a 1-game slate. You never know what kind of weird stuff could happen. So, at 24% total ownership, I don't mind the Gibson play.
Yeah, I'm with you. The more I keep thinking about this, like he's the one cheap skill position player that he doesn't necessarily fit the consensus build, but I think being on the Commander's side with the higher team total in the more attractive overall offensive environment at 3,200, he's really one of the cheap guys that I think the field is going to be able to find their way to. And it's one of those plays that if you flipped it at 24.5% in large field, I think it's still probably a pretty good play. It's one that I worry though, like in some of the smaller field stuff, $100 SPY, $200 double SPY, the 4-4-4 4-point stance, those types of smaller single entry three max type contests. Wouldn't be surprised to see this one push north of 30, 35, even 40%, just because how easy he is to fit in really almost any type of build. So I wouldn't be surprised if you actually saw more double Washington running backs than we're initially anticipating. I think they can still both get there, but the more I think about it, like if Brian Robinson really gets there in a big way, it's probably because of a lot of positive game script, a lot of carries between the tackles, maybe falls in the end zone once or twice. It probably limits how many long down and distance opportunities Gibson has. It probably limits how many 2-minute snaps Antonio Gibson has. So he really needs to rack up receptions in a short period of time, which he can absolutely do. But I think maybe it's one of those things that I'll allow together, but maybe I want to dock it a little bit more than the optimizer is going to give it to me naturally.
Yeah. Gal Pete saying Robinson with Gibson onslaught seems pretty sharp. I think that is reasonable, but I probably like Gibson most in scenarios where you go like 4-2 on the Bears side or 2-4, however you want to look at it, and they're playing from behind. All right, let's talk those Bears backs. A lot of talk going into the last couple of weeks that, hey, Roschon Johnson's eating into this role a little bit more. Coaching staff likes the look of the rookie. They want to get him more involved. And then Khalil Herbert comes out and it was a world beater last week and kind of, I think, really took a firm grasp on that RB1 job. Another situation where it's fully dependent on game script as far as my, interest in these two guys, but we still saw Herbert have a little bit higher of a target share as well. Not that we think of him as a pass catcher. I do think Roschon Johnson is the preferred third down pass catching type back, but Herbert very talented in between the tackles runner. If this game is close, I could see him, the Bears sticking to the run for as long as they possibly can.
I agree. I think the Bears want to stick to the run as long as they possibly can. We'll see if game script allows them to do that. Definitely based off of pass rate over expectation and situation neutral rush rate. Really, any way you try and slice it up, they are a team that does want to keep the ball on the ground for as long as possible. They just really haven't been able to do that given the way some of their games have gone to start the season. I kind of like Khalil Herbert, and maybe if game script builders get away from the expectation that this game does remain close and kind of build in the sense that Washington is going to blow out Chicago, you could actually see reduced ownership on Khalil Herbert. He's only $600 cheaper than Brian Robinson. I think that the similarities in their price tags might keep ownership down a little bit. He's still the lead rusher in this offense. 46% rush share to 27% for Roschon Johnson on the season. 49% route participation to 30%, 12% target share. He's operating more obviously in short down and distance, 88% to 13%, and still has kind of a lead on the long down and distance work at 58% to Roschon Johnson's 42%. I still think that Roschon Johnson is likely to eat into this workload as the season goes on. I think the coaching staff really does like him and would like to see him develop a little bit more. But on a 1 week sample in this game tonight specifically, I still think Khalil Herbert has a stranglehold on that job. And I think that, the price tag difference is correct. I think that they might end up a little bit closer in terms of ownership because that discount to Johnson will kind of make some lineups work. I think that you might just get this natural situation where Khalil Herbert gets squeezed out a little bit.
Yeah, which makes him a fascinating player, right? 8,600 is pretty efficient from a pricing perspective. Again, if you like the Commanders in this game, I think Roschon is interesting on the other side of 4-2s or something like that. But I don't mind the Herbert play, especially if he gets squeezed out. From a captain perspective, I'm assuming both Herbert and Robinson would make your captain pool here for the running backs.
Yeah, definitely. I really don't have any interest in Gibson at captain. I think because of the way the salary structure works out on this slate, he actually might get pushed up. You see 2.6% there. Seems a little high even at that. And just based off of wanting to fit in Fields and Howell and Robinson, things of that nature, I think that Antonio Gibson's captain ownership could creep up just as a result of the Opto Bros forcing him in a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want to go there with captain on Gibson. I think that's getting too cute. Let's go to receivers. We'll go team by team here. Let's start on the Chicago side. DJ Moore definitely been entrenched as a true wide receiver one, as you break down in your column. Chase Claypool away from the team now. This is really DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney in all 2 receiver sets. DJ Moore is someone that I'm really interested at here with ownership. Game script says they're going to be playing from behind. They're forcing him targets. I think he elevates Fields, probably not the other way around. So I think in situations where you go Fields, you probably want some DJ Moore in there, and only 32% ownership because of that salary. Like he seems really good to me at first glance tonight.
The salary is really the interesting thing here. I saw him flip at 10K when I first pulled up the slate and thought, man, there is no way the field is going to find their way here with Justin Fields only $1,000 more expensive and has the rushing upside. You have Brian Robinson, who's $800 cheaper. You have Sam Howell, who's $600 cheaper. Terry McLaurin on the other side, I think, is still overpriced, but he's only $200 more expensive in the better offense. No one is going to play DJ Moore tonight. And, I ran a couple thousand of our optimal lineups and kind of baked in some industry projections just to kind of get a sense of like, what will the Opto Bros be getting tonight? And man, DJ Moore isn't popping at all. He's not popping at all in flex. He's not popping at all in captain. And so we have 32.1%, mostly because you have the salary to get there if you want to. But I think what will ultimately happen when the cards flip tonight is some of this ownership from DJ Moore is going to go to Brian Robinson. Some of it's going to go to Justin Fields. Some of it will go to Terry McLaurin. And really, if DJ Moore flipped tonight at 25% or lower, I wouldn't be all that surprised just because of how poor this base projection is. 11.6 base DraftKings points at 10K is really bad. And from, kind of an on-field perspective, he still is this team's wide receiver one, although that isn't a super great role. He still leads in target share, first read target share, air yard share, has a decent 13.6 yard ADOT, has a nice catch rate. And really aside from week 1 where he was locked up with Jair Alexander for a majority of his routes, he's gotten targets when he's been in there. So I think DJ Moore is a really interesting play who is very likely to get squeezed out in small field and single entry type stuff. And I know it's going to look bad from a projection standpoint, but I think this is one that's kind of okay to IKB a little bit.
So I have no say in the projections or projection inputs on the back end, but 11.6 seems low to me. He's been 30.1 last week, 13.1 in week 3, 19.4 in week 2. Has at least a 30-yard catch in 3 of those last 3 games. You mentioned the target shares there. Again, I don't believe in this offense necessarily, but it's the front 7 that scares me on Washington. If he gets any time back there at all, I think there's some deep play ability for DJ Moore. So I think that there's some more room in that projection personally. And I would be, whether you guys make that change on the back end, Cody, or in general, I would, if I were running builds tonight, I'd be bumping him up a little bit personally. I think that's a little low from my purview.
Yeah, and if you want to get to him and you're using the established throne projections, you will have to make some manual adjustments or set minimum exposure caps, things of that nature. I mean, just running hour optimals for 20 max, 150 set, 300, whatever you're doing, you're not going to get any DJ Moore because of that price tag.
IKB means I know better, and squeeze is saying like a player is going to get squeezed out of ownership, and where you would say steam, they're going to get steamed up. Like a lot of the field's going to play them squeeze that, hey, they're going to fall through the cracks a little bit. IKB play means that it's projecting as a bad play. Essentially, it doesn't necessarily make it a bad play. If you have the conviction that it's a play, it's you're basically. And DJ Moore is a good example. I'm saying I would IKB this DJ Moore projection and play him higher than we're projecting him. If we have time, we'll take you through more lingo at the end of the show. Darnell Mooney is a guy that I still believe in the talent. It's hard to invest in too many pieces of this pass offense. I just kind of painted the bull case for DJ Moore. Obviously, you're talking two very different price tiers here at 5,000 and 10,000. I don't know how many Fields doubles we want to get into, and we haven't even started speaking about Cole Kmet here. But how do you handle Darnell Mooney, who's kind of in an island in this price range tonight?
It's tough because I think the price tag keeps him in play, but I also think on the opposite end of that spectrum, the price tag is going to keep ownership around a little bit, where I think DJ Moore could come in lower owned because he's too expensive. I think Darnell Mooney could come in higher owned than maybe he should be because he's quite a bit cheaper, half the price tag. He's still second on the team in routes run. We expect that to remain consistent for as long as Chase Claypool is not with the team. He's a distant third on the team in target share at 13.6%, fourth in air yard share at 17.4%. It just seems like one of those spots, and we've talked about a few of these receivers on recent shows, where he's not going to give me the requisite volume that I want for a PPR site like DraftKings, where I know he could just rack up like 9 for 60 and that would be enough. And he doesn't have this massive ADOT where I know he could maybe catch 1 or 2 deep passes and that could be enough. So he's kind of falls in like this no man's land where really for Darnell Mooney to get there, you're probably looking at like 4 or 5 receptions. He's probably going to have to house one, which if you just want to make a bet on like Darnell Mooney scoring a touchdown, then that's okay. I just don't think that his role is all that attractive to provide like a slate winning type score at 5K. I still think that he's an okay play because the price tag is cheap enough. I just don't think he's a standout play because you're likely to get some sort of, median score around 7, 8, 9 DraftKings points and very unlikely to find a ceiling on him.
Yeah, I think that was well said. I don't have anything to add there. As far as these tertiary Bears receivers, you got Equanimeous St. Brown. Velus Jones is around. Tyler Scott, I guess, would be the punt, the 4th round rookie. Any takes on these guys?
Yeah, I think you've got to keep him in your player pool because as we'll keep going here, like there's just not a whole lot of attractive, cheap skill position value. Antonio Gibson's kind of been the one guy that we've talked about so far that profiles as that cheap skill position value. I think EQ St. Brown at 1,800, had he been left down at like 200, would be the punt du jour where everyone would go to him. I think the fact that they priced him up a little bit is actually interesting from a large field tournament perspective where ownership's going to remain low. It's tough to get a good projection on him. He's somebody that's probably going to run a route on 50 to 60% of dropbacks, maybe has 1 or 2, 3 targets if we're lucky. You're really hoping for him to come down with one, but he is that deep threat in Chicago's offense, if there is such a thing. And so maybe you see 120, 25 yard type throw downfield if he gets behind the defense, and maybe he could get there on that. Tyler Scott is interesting a little bit too, from that perspective of like, he's the stone minimum. He is a rookie. You can start to see his role expand a little bit more, of course, now that Chase Claypool is out of town and they look for a legitimate wide receiver 3 in this offense. So I think Tyler Scott is okay, but still you're looking at these guys as like just large field tournament dart throws at best.
Yeah, agreed. There, let's talk Washington side. You mentioned Terry McLaurin. I think also overpriced here at 10-2. $200 more than DJ Moore. Better base projection. What was I'm guessing he's on a slightly higher ceiling projection as well. Yeah, about a 1.5 higher ceiling projection than DJ Moore, but a lot more ownership. And has Jahan Dotson, who I think is kind of becoming a mainstay of Leone's buy low model here because he's out there on the field. Target share isn't that different. We believe in the talent still, yet there's just been no box score production really there from Jahan Dotson. So I know you wrote about this in your column too. You get massive savings on Dotson and similar ownership. Hard to not want to maybe just go in that direction. But how are you handling these 2 top Commanders receivers tonight?
Yeah, I think from any sort of cash game style perspective, Jahan Dotson is the play. He's $3,200 cheaper. You see they're only separated by 0.9 DraftKings points, really similar ceilings as well, 0.7 separated by 0.7 there. But there's a $3,200 difference there. And really the target share, air yard share, red zone target share, in zone targets, whatever metric you want to look at, they're really pretty close. You could do a blind player comparison where you don't have the names, and you would probably prefer Jahan Dotson if looking at their usage profiles. Right now, we have Terry McLaurin for a little bit higher ownership. I think the market kind of sees McLaurin as a little bit better play than maybe we do it at ETR. So you're seeing a little bit more ownership. But if you told me in small field contests when the cards flip tonight at 8:15 that Terry McLaurin came in lower owned than Jahan Dotson, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think those $3,200 that you get from McLaurin to Dotson are quite meaningful. And it's going to help you get up to Brian Robinson and Sam Howell and Justin Fields. So I think that we'll probably see ownership really similar on these plays. And I could even see it coming in lower on McLaurin. For those reasons, it's got me a little bit more interested in McLaurin. I was just hoping that when I ran ownership, it would be even lower than it is. I think at 40.8%, it's an okay play, but I was kind of hoping to see that in the low 30s or even less because of the price tag.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a good breakdown. I mean, obviously, I still think McLaurin is a higher ceiling player than Dotson at this point in his career, but I think the difference there is somewhat negligible. But we'll see. We haven't seen that yet on the field, and I know Dotson was getting so steamed up at the end of draft season here, and we're just kind of waiting to see that.
Yeah.
The wild card here is Curtis Samuel, who has been earning targets so far this season. And it's a very clear 3 receiver set there. He's going to be operating out of the slot. They do kind of sometimes use unique ways to get him the ball. You mentioned that if the Bears do have an impressive part of their defense or somewhat impressive part of their defense, it might be covering these slot receivers. So I think he's a clear, and projections also say this, I think he's a clear third fiddle amongst this group, but certainly someone that should be in consideration tonight.
Yeah, I agree. And at 5,600, there's going to be people funneling there. I think at 5,600, people would rather play him than they would Darnell Mooney. Maybe even Roshan Johnson at 4,800. So it's kind of this weird price point where none of these guys really project well, but you kind of need to get onto some of these guys in order to make roster constructions work. And I think that's where we're going to see ownership funnel a little bit in Samuel's direction. The usage isn't overly great, but it's okay enough that I think you could talk yourself into it. He's still third on the team in target share at 15.3%, third in air yard share at 13.3%. I think the Bears are just more likely to give up plays to perimeter wide receivers. We've kind of seen that play out through the early part of the season. So I prefer McLaurin and Dotson, but I think if you find yourself in a lineup that's got 5,600 remaining, I think there are worse options you can have than Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, agreed there. Same question to you as far as the punts on this side. It looks like it's Diontae Brown and Byron Pringle who have projections on them.
Yeah, not a lot here. I think Diontae Brown being 2,800 is going to be really tough to even keep him in like a large field MME player pool. He's just not out there a ton. He's not earning a ton of opportunities. So it's really just a bet on him banking one of those big plays. And he's getting a few of those opportunities per game. He's got a 15.1 yard ADOT, but he's out there for like 25 to 30% of the team's routes. It's kind of just a touchdown or bust dart throw, but I guess most of these guys are at this point. Byron Pringle, again, like Tyler Scott, being $200, just keeps him in play for that reason alone, where he doesn't need to do a whole lot to find his way into a winning lineup. I would prefer Tyler Scott because I think the younger guy, the rookie, kind of has a chance for his role to expand with Chase Claypool gone, whereas Byron Pringle is what Byron Pringle is, probably going to run around on between 15 and 20% of dropbacks, and really tough to justify that.
Yeah. Agreed. Let's go to tight end. We'll talk about the position as a whole here. And I think the conversation starts with Cole Kmet, who a little bit of a coming out party last week for him, caught 2 of those 4 Justin Fields passing touchdowns. And we really have often seen, and I don't have the data in front of me right now, but on these games where Fields really goes bonkers, it just seems to me that Cole Kmet's involved. So 6,400, projecting obviously as the best of these tight end options on this slate. Only less than 30% total ownership. What's your interest level on Cole Kmet here tonight?
Yeah, I think it's fair. If ownership remains at 28.7%, you get this big discount off Darnell Mooney and really off DJ Moore, and they're really not separated by all that much in base projection. Maybe that you could argue that gap should be a little bit wider, but Kmet's role has actually been pretty good in this offense, even outside of last week's 27.6 DraftKings point eruption. He's got a 20.7% target share, 19.5% air yard share. We have a pretty good feeling he's going to be the team leader in end zone targets and red zone targets by the time it's all said and done. Seems like a relatively neutral matchup. At 6,400, I think it's pretty fair, and he's an okay source of value, if you want to call him that, at 6,400 on a slate that really is kind of deprived of value.
You have any interest in Fields doubles? Like, what are the chances you think he repeats last week's performance here? Because, last week a Fields Kmet DJ Moore wouldn't have been only good on a showdown slate, it was good on a main slate. So how would you approach that tonight?
Yeah, I think you have to think through ways to get different with playing Fields at captain tonight. I think too much of the field will play Fields at with kind of naked or playing with just one receiver. So if you're doing that, I think you need to be mindful about the remaining pieces in your lineup. If you're going naked and you're kind of doing the 1-5 thing, I think that'll actually be relatively common. I think one way you can get different is playing Fields with somebody like Mooney and just saying, okay, I'm accepting the fact that DJ Moore is a little bit overpriced. Let's just say Mooney outscores Cole Kmet as the one Bears pass catcher you need to have. I think you can also play some doubles with one of the cheap guys where you get, a couple of receptions or a big reception from Equinemius St. Brown, and then have Cole Kmet get in the end zone or have DJ Moore rack up a bunch of receptions. So I think doubles are viable. I would just be mindful about how you're playing those doubles, which ones are going to be common, which ones require a ton of passing volume from Fields for them to get there. Like a Fields double with Kmet and DJ Moore will probably be the most common, but think about how much volume Fields would need to have as a thrower. And I know we just saw it last week, but he's got to basically, duplicate that type of performance to support those two pass catchers at those two price tags with everything else that's on the slate. So for me, I think I'll have some Fields singles. I will probably have some Fields doubles as well. But the way that I'm thinking through those is just adding one of those cheaper options to the stack, so I don't need as much volume from Fields to get there.
Yeah, I think that was a strong, comprehensive breakdown. Talk about someone that looks overpriced to me is Logan Thomas. And I know that he's kind of taken that true tight end one role back from Cole Turner or these secondary guys. He looks healthy. He played 75+% of snaps or whatever last week. That's all encouraging. But 5,200 for an older Logan Thomas who is always hurt with McLaurin and Robinson and Gibson and Samuel competing for some real talented guys for targets. That just seems rich for me. And then you throw in 20+% ownership. I just don't have much of an interest there if I'm playing that mid tier. There's other guys I'd rather go to.
Oh man, it's gross. It's really gross. I think Silva calls these guys catch and fall down tight ends.
Yeah,
I'm sure he's not the only one, but that's what sticks out in my mind when I think about Logan Thomas. 77% route participation in his first game back. He missed week 3 with injury, comes back, gets basically his normal tight end one roll back. His targets per route run is pretty low. His ADOT is pretty low. Again, like these guys where you think you're going to get a few receptions. They're going to probably catch the ball and fall down. You're not going to get much yak. You're really just hoping that they fall into the end zone. And if they do, you're doing backflips. If they don't, you're kind of just left with nothing. And Logan Thomas feels like one of those guys. He's not going to break off some massive run on a 5-yard out route or anything like that. So you're really hoping for him to find the end zone. I mean, again, you can make those bets on a single game slate. It's not something I would prefer to do at 5,200 and coming with ownership. I just wish this team would play Cole Turner more, man. He got kind of the spot start in week 3, ran around on 56% of dropbacks. Clearly a target earner, 32% targets per route run rate in that spot start in week 3. This dude is a baller in the preseason. He was a baller in college. Maybe there's some opportunities for Cole Turner to get more involved in this game. I think at 800 he should make your MME player pool, but it's just really gross that they're continuing to do this with Logan Thomas.
Yeah, I agree. I'm waiting for them to figure out that they should be playing Cole Turner because he's a very athletic, talented guy. And I know we had one good season of Logan Thomas back in 2020, and everyone was excited about him. He had 70 catches and 9 touchdowns or whatever. But even then, he was a journeyman at that point. I think he was 29. He's 32 now, and he's always injury prone. As you said, I think he's a catch and fall tight end at this point. So if I were to take a shot on Washington tight ends, just give me the punt, give me the salary saving. We see weird tight end stuff on Showdown all the time, and give me Cole Turner, who I would come in way over the field on. I would probably triple up that ownership at least, 3 to 10, 9, 10% for me on Cole Turner. So anyway, yeah. Any interest on any of these other punts, Big Bob Tunyon or John Bates or anyone else?
Yeah, I think just as a necessity, they've got to make the MME player pool. But if you're doing even a 20 max, certainly 3 max single entry, I just don't think there's enough there to really warrant going there. I think that they're all pretty thin. Cole Turner's the one that just has the actual upside on a few opportunities that I think he could get there. And I mean, we're never playing for in-game injuries to happen, but if something were to crop up with Logan Thomas, there's a pretty natural 1-for-1 replacement there. And Cole Turner is cheap. So I think for those reasons at 2.4%, you can make the case with the talented tight end, but man, it's really gross from a pump perspective on the entire slate today.
Yeah, I agree there. All right, Cody, we have to do it. It was another defensive captain slate on Monday night with Seattle's defense putting up 45 in the captain or something like that. Yep. Against the Giants. Chad mentioning people have short memories. They want to chase that. It's a pretty good spot for this Commanders defense, I would say. 28% total ownership. Are you changing your tune on the interest in playing any defense at captain? And how do you feel about these defenses tonight?
Yeah, I feel like, man, at some point I'm just going to have to change my tune because I'm going to keep getting my teeth kicked in by fading these defenses, especially a captain. And look, we've talked about them being good flex plays. I think we even showed the Seahawks, looking at the sim results from the Monday night game, that we showed the Seahawks as a plus EV defense. Keep in mind that was a plus EV play in the flex. What generally happens is there's just such low percentage chances of them finding those types of ceilings that you need for them to be the optimal captain that they end up getting overplayed, especially in these spots where it looks like they're a good play on paper, and they are. The Commanders defense is a phenomenal play on paper. Justin Fields loves to take sacks. Justin Fields has problems holding onto the ball. Justin Fields is a poor decision maker, will throw a couple of interceptions. All of those things are true. However, DST scoring is entirely unpredictable and very, very random, and particularly the ones where we're getting 35 to 40 DraftKings points at captain from one of them. The difference between a pick six that could have been a touchdown or something like that, where we had with Daniel Jones on Monday, is the difference between them being the optimal captain and them just being a good play that should have been played in the flex. So, hey, I think the Commanders DST is a good play on this slate. I will most likely be reserving them to flex only, and they will be mostly played in lineups where I have 3 or 4 other Commanders in the lineups, kind of playing on that onslaught type narrative. That's what I've got to say. I think there's a chance that they come in way north of this 5% just based off of the matchup, based off of what's priced around them. I mean, if you just sort by pricing here, you're looking at like them versus Curtis Samuel, or them versus Logan Thomas, or them versus Cairo Santos, or them versus Darnell Mooney. And I think most people submitting lineups tonight, especially in larger field contests, would much prefer to just play the Commanders defense against Justin Fields than any of those skill position players. So it's going to be high. They're a good play. Know that you're not pulling a fast one on anyone, because they're definitely going to be owned, but it is a good play.
Yeah. What about the Bears side? You got $1,400 savings. Seems solid there as well. Sam Howell, we saw, a couple weeks ago I'm not saying the Bears are the Bills, obviously they're not, but we saw that he was very prone to sacks and turnovers as well. So they seem interesting to me as well at the discount that you get there.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. $1,400 cheaper, going to come with way less ownership in flex and captain. Not going to be played as much simply because of the way you've got a 6-point spread. Most lineups are going to funnel towards a 4-2 or 5-1 Washington heavy type construction. I think the Bears defense is actually going to be underplayed in flex. Still don't have interest in them at captain, but I think they're going to be, quite underplayed at flex given what they're priced around and what they need to do to be optimal. No one has taken more sacks this season through 4 games, not even Daniel Jones, than Sam Howell. And you mentioned it, the Bears defense is definitely not the Bills, but they can certainly bring pressure. And if Sam Howell tends to hold on to the football maybe a little bit longer than he should, there's opportunities for sack fumbles, scoop and scores, pick sixes, things like that. The stuff that we talk about that is so random in the NFL. The Bears are as capable as the Commanders, is kind of forcing those types of plays with Sam Howell under center. So I do like the Bears at 4K. I think they're an interesting tournament option.
Any kicker thoughts with Sly or Santos here?
Yeah, Sly is going to profile as probably one of the best overall value plays on the slate. I saw a question in chat pop up that asked if there were any other cash game necessities outside of Fields and Sam Howell. I think the one that I would turn to would probably be Joey Sly. The reason for that, he's $400 cheaper than Cairo Santos, which I find bizarre. He's at home. He's got the higher team total. I think the Commanders are more likely to move the ball, even if they stall out in the red zone a little bit more often than maybe they should. And that's a good thing for Joey Sly. So if I'm looking at cash game style contests, I would prefer to have Joey Sly in those lineups.
Yeah, agreed there. I think that does it before flag plants here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to get them in.
I'll go on a quick
go ahead.
Quick DST at captain rant real quick, or just advice while people fly in questions if you have any. It happened on the Giants Seahawks slate, and it happens a lot on these slates where we have a DST at captain, right? You have a DST that is likely 48 to 5,400, somewhere in that range. If they're optimal and if you're playing them at captain, the rest of your lineup is going to look very similar to everyone else's lineup that is playing them at captain. So maybe you get them at 3, 4, 5%. You think that's pretty low captain ownership. The 5% of those lineups that are entered into a contest are going to look very similar to one another, because if you've got the cheap captain, you can fit in Fields, you can fit in Howell, you can fit in Brian Robinson, and all of a sudden the rest of your 5 flex spots look pretty close, even if not exactly identical to everyone else's that is rostering that captain DST. It happened with the Seahawks where you had a 31-way chop up top. We saw it with DeAndre Swift, who of course is not a DST, but he was cheap. I think 4,800 on that Eagles-Vikings slate, where that lineup was duplicated like 340 times because it was just cheap DeAndre Swift and then all the good plays after that. So I think if you're going that captain DST route, and I've poo-pooed it a ton on this show, but if you want to go the Commanders DST route, be mindful about A, what are the remaining plays that you're playing in flex? B, how much salary are you leaving on the table? Most of those lineups are going to try and max out the salary by just playing the best plays after the DST. Maybe you can get unique by leaving a little bit of salary on the table. So just think through that. I think it's okay if you want to go the captain DST route. If you have that conviction on this slate and you want to play the Commanders DST, just be mindful about the remaining 5 pieces that you have in that lineup, so you aren't duping with 50, 100 people with that lineup.
Cody Main with the goods, per usual. Hoffler reminds us that this was a game last year, Thursday night. I think it was week 6. It was exactly 1 week from now, October 13th. I just looked. That was 12-7. I remember it well. It was very ugly. That was the game that we all thought Brian Robinson would score a touchdown. I believe he did because it was his first game back. But let's hope we get a better game than that one tonight. Austin asks, who's our favorite of those 4 or 5K pivots from the defenses? For me, I think it's Curtis Samuel, but it's close, I guess, with Mooney and some of these other guys. It's pretty close with all that range for me.
Yeah, you take Samuel. I think that's pretty strong. He's got a 1 point higher projection at $200 more expensive. I guess if forced to choose, I would take Darnell Mooney there.
Yeah, it's a tough.
Look, you don't feel great about it. You just you have a tough time saying Curtis Samuel. I have a tough time saying Darnell Mooney. Roschon Johnson is the RB2 on a team that's a 6-point road dog. He's 4,800. Logan Thomas is a catch and fall down tight end. So you could see these situations where the Commanders DST is going to be really popular.
Yeah, Roschon would be close.
For good reason.
Close second for me. If you like the Washington side, I think he's interesting. Bry asked, do we need a pass catcher in Fields captain lineups?
I don't think so. I think there's a couple of reasons why, where normally I would say, yes, you do. A couple of reasons why. DJ Moore could still have a good game that helps propel Justin Fields to the optimal captain and not be optimal himself because he's really expensive. The other reason why is Justin Fields is probably one of the 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the entire league that could absolutely do it all through the legs. Goes 100 plus 2 or 100 plus 1 even on the ground would probably be plenty. And he's only 11K. Usually when we talk about these dual threat rushing quarterbacks, we're thinking like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. We're thinking of them at like 12-2, 12-4. 11K is a little bit more palatable if you get that rushing upside from Fields. So no, I don't think you have to have a pass catcher if you're playing Captain Fields.
Yeah, I agree. I would probably boost them in most Captain Fields lineups. So I don't think you have to. Steven asked a similar question. Thoughts on a naked Sam Howell tonight? That seems getting a little bit too cute for me personally.
Yeah, I think that's getting a little bit more too cute. He doesn't have quite the rushing upside that Fields does. He's not been as willing a runner as maybe we thought he would. Only 11 total rushing attempts through 4 games, so maybe get 3 or 4 rushing attempts. I think he's capable as a runner. I think he's pretty talented and athletic, and he is cheaper, so I can see why you're trying to make that case. But I still think that given this team's pass rate over expectation and the price tags on the various Commanders receivers, I think that if he gets there as the optimal captain, he probably brings somebody with him.
Yeah, we're not going to answer start sit questions on this show. I encourage you to, of course, go to Pat Thorman's rankings on establishthерun.com. Who's top ranker in all the land. Those answer them for you. Take one or two more here. I think this is a pretty interesting one. In 5-1 or 4-2 Bears heavy, would you prefer Fields captain or flex?
Yeah, Fields captain, I think in those situations. I think he's so likely to contribute to the team's team total in those instances, whether it's through the air or on the ground with his legs. I think you probably want him in captain to soak up that Bears offensive explosion in those cases.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, I'm trying to paint those pictures in my head, right? Like it depends. Like if it's obviously those Fields explosion games that we saw last year when it was like the 8 for 130 and 2 rushing touchdowns, like that's always going to be Fields, right? If it's something similar to what we saw last week where he had 304 through the air, it's possible that gets concentrated to Kmet or more. I think more likely it happens where it's kind of more weighted towards his ground game that leads to a ceiling performance from Fields. So I would agree that I like him better in the captain, but if it's not, I probably want it to be DJ Moore or I guess Cole Kmet in those scenarios. I don't think or Khalil Herbert, I guess. I guess you can make the argument. You can make the argument that Herbert, they get down to the 1 a couple times. Herbert knocks in 3, and that's kind of the Bears heavy stuff.
Historically, the quarterback has been the optimal captain in 5-1s or 1-5s, however you want to look at it, 30.5% of the time. Obviously, this is not just a trying to paint a 1-for-1 picture by any means. Wide receiver is second best at 28.1. Running back 22.9, and then DST surprisingly 14.1% in 5-1/1-5 stuff. So I do think if you want to go that captain DST route, just play for it to be a blowout where you need to soak up all of the offensive production from the Bears pieces or on the other side, the Commanders pieces. And you can get away in those instances with playing the DST at captain a little bit more.
Yeah. These are great questions. They're getting very good questions. I'll take this last one from Jason. We'll get out of here. Should we prioritize the Chicago run game in lineups where we fade Fields? I mean, this is the classic, game script goes one way, that means something else happens type of thing. I get skeptical about leaning into narratives like this, like I do on main slates on Showdown, because things can be so fluky, but curious your take here.
Yeah, things can be so fluky, and at some point you just need the raw points. Right. It goes back to that Daniel Jones example, and I hate to keep using that, but it's just fresh in my mind, where at some point you just need the raw points on a single game slate, because you only have 6 options to fill and only so many options on the entire slate to fill it. I do think it's an interesting way to maximize the leverage on a Fields fade, right? He's going to be 75 to 80, 85% owned, maybe 90% in some contests. And if you're making that bet that Fields isn't in the winning lineup, I think maximizing that by saying, okay, maybe I think it's because the rushing efficiency or the rushing touchdowns go through Herbert or Roschon Johnson or something like that is an interesting way to play it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is intuitive. It does make sense. So thanks for all the questions, guys. Those were great. Cody, let's get Flag Plants in here and get out of here. I'll give you the honors, my friend. Who you got tonight?
Yeah, I hope I didn't telegraph this one too much, but I'm going to DJ Moore. Kind of IKB'd the projections with Wan'Dale Robinson. It didn't work out, but it felt like it was really close to working out. Wan'Dale Robinson ended up with a really awesome role in that Giants-Seahawks game. Felt like he could have had a bigger game, and really for 3K, it ended up being okay. I'm going to DJ Moore. I think the projection is a little bit light here. The projection team does fantastic work. I think maybe DJ Moore is probably getting docked because of the Chicago Bears passing game efficiency or inefficiencies for that matter. I think he's also probably getting docked because this game's team total, and all of those things are combining to make him look like a really, really poor play at 10K. He's still the team's wide receiver 1, has a 20.7% target share, 33.8% first read target share. I think they're going to draw up some opportunities for him. And after playing against Jair Alexander and Pat Surtain, who he ended up cooking against with the Broncos. But I think that they're going to drop some opportunities for him. I think he finally shakes loose. I know he had a pretty good game last week. I think we get a really big game from DJ Moore tonight.
Yeah, he was where I would have gone as well. So go Terps. It's a double cosign on DJ Moore. I will go Jahan Dotson then. I think something's got to give here on the Dotson of it all. And I get that, the salary saving makes him the cash game play, but I still think that the field will want to click McLaurin more than him. At the very least, we're getting similar ownership and you get the salary savings. Plus, I think at the end of the day, ceilings aren't that dissimilar. I do like Terry McLaurin as a talent quite a bit, but I also still believe in Dotson. I think a big game is coming. Very, very easily could be against this Bears team. So I very much like Jahan Dotson here. That's where I'll go. I'm going to drop a note to the projections team I'm about the DJ Moore projection. I'm just curious if we could be a little light there, but I'm with you there on DJ Moore for sure. All right. I think that will do it. We will be back either Sunday or Monday. We'll see for another Showdown slate. Good luck tonight. Good luck for all of week 5. And I wish you guys all the most success. For Cody, I am Gary. We will see you soon. Good luck, everyone.